Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you again from my office rather than from the Highgrove building, which is a shame for me. I much prefer being with you and opening the Word together, but it is what it is, and we'll have to deal with it. The nice thing is I'm coming from a place where I work all the time at home, and because I'm on sabbatical this term, I'm doing a lot of time reading and studying and trying to write a book. And that makes it a perfect spot for today's new series to begin as we go through the book of Proverbs for a few weeks. The book of Proverbs it does what it says on the tin. It's a collection of sayings, of proverbs, 915 of them, mostly from a guy called Solomon, but also some others, handed down and passed down and written down for us. And it's filled with wisdom. It's like pebbles on the shore. You can look at each one of these proverbs individually and you can examine each one for its beauty. You can also look at the whole sweep of the coast and get a look at the whole shape of it and see beauty there as well. The problem with looking at the whole book is that the overall shape of the book is sometimes a little bit unclear and a bit confusing. If you try sitting down to read the whole of the book of Proverbs, you'll probably get a bit bewildered. It's not like reading the Old Testament stories where you get a real sense of the plot and the characters and the story driving the message along. And it's not like reading one of the letters in the New Testament where there's a clear argument and it seems to be going somewhere and seems to be organised. In fact, scholars of the book of Proverbs argue about whether it has a shape at all. And so it can be a little bewildering to look at the whole sweep of it. But it does have a clear message. It tells you about wisdom. And it promises that if you seek wisdom and find it, you'll be blessed. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a minute. And it celebrates wisdom. It celebrates it like the beauty when all those little pebbles on the beach come together to form the sweep of a coastline. Listen to this from chapter 3 of Proverbs, which imagines wisdom like a wonderful woman. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honour. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Those who hold her fast will be blessed. That gives you a little taste of how Proverbs celebrates wisdom. It's the big picture. They're looking at the whole coast. But you can also pick up the individual pebbles and you can look at each one, and each one's got its own shape and colour and weight and beauty in its own way. Many of the Proverbs are arranged in two little parallel lines and with some kind of relationship between the two. There's other forms of Proverbs too. There's poems and riddles and blessings and all sorts of other kinds of things. But these little parallel line ones are particularly interesting. Like pebbles, each one's beautiful in its own way. Sometimes they'll explore one idea from two different angles, like this one from chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. See that? Two angles, father and mother. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. A garland for your head and a chain to adorn your neck. One idea from two different angles. Sometimes the two lines set up a contrast, though, like this one, which seems particularly appropriate given the news this week. I'm recording this right now with the US elections coming in. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favour with him. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. You see that? The contrast. Detesting dishonest scales, favour with accurate ones. Pride versus humility, and contrast between the two. Sometimes you get two sides of a coin, and the truth is found when you hold both together, like this one from chapter 15. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. And to top it off, if that wasn't a confusing enough selection, you've also got some of them that appear to be contradictory. Listen to this famous one from Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. That makes sense. You don't get down in the dirt with a fool, you'll end up muddy. But then verse 5. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. Do not answer a fool, verse 4. Answer a fool, verse 5. What are we supposed to do with this frustrating and wonderful book? The short answer is that Proverbs reminds us, when we step back and look at the whole thing, not just the individual verses, it reminds us that true wisdom isn't something that we ultimately master, that we kind of take for ourselves and keep. Now, we are to seek after it, but we're not to seek after it as something that we then own and control. Proverbs isn't like an instruction manual with 900 off-the-shelf solutions to all of life's problems. What the book shows us is that different situations call for different answers. Sometimes you answer the fool according to his folly. Sometimes you don't answer the fool according to his folly. And wisdom knows which is which. And wisdom knows when to go where. Wisdom is like knowing how to improvise. It's like being a jazz player. Not a naff jazz player that just twiddles about, but a skillful jazz player that knows how to be faithful to the music while also improvising to whatever is happening on the stage. That's true wisdom. Faithful improvising in the way of God. Now, this is all starting to sound very confusing. Give me something I can start with. Where do we begin? Well, thankfully, Proverbs does give a very clear answer on where we should begin. Where do we find it? Before we look, I talk about two quick problems that Proverbs identifies that I think are in our world. I certainly see them in myself. I think they're pretty universal problems. And they're the opposite of each other. Problem one is the problem of completely ignoring teaching, scorning knowledge, being anti-intellectual, being anti-brain, not seeking after wisdom, but being quite content without it. I've seen myself do that sometimes, where I deliberately don't want to find out truth. I don't want answers. I don't want to have to think. Proverbs names that as a problem with humans, and Proverbs calls it folly. That's what fools do. But there's another opposite problem, which is to have too high a view of our own knowledge and rely too much on it, on our own understanding of the world, not recognizing that there are limits to what humans can know. That we are not masters of our own destiny. We cannot understand everything there is to understand. And to believe so is also a kind of folly. So those are the two problems, the two extremes, if you like, that we are to avoid. On the one hand, completely ignoring and despising knowledge. And on the other hand, relying too much on it and thinking that we've got this. Proverbs, thankfully, has an answer to this. And the answer is found right at the beginning of the book in chapter 1 and verse 7. Where it says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's the beginning. Wisdom's like a journey, not an instruction manual. Wisdom is when you begin with the Lord and walk with him in the way of wisdom. And the start of that journey of wisdom is fear of the Lord. Now we need to pause for a second here, because this idea of fear of the Lord is easily misunderstood. And this is sometimes something that very much puts people off. Fear in the Bible, fear of the Lord in the Bible, is not terror. It's not being afraid of God. Fear of the Lord, as the Bible understands it, is a desire to want our whole lives turned towards him, conforming our thoughts, our actions, our desires, our relationships, our money, our speech, everything, our values, the things we care about, to what God wants for his world and for us. That's fear of the Lord, seeking to have our whole lives turned Godwards. The world will want to turn us in all sorts of other ways, giving us all sorts of other stories to live by. One of the most powerful and influential, which is all around us, is be true to yourself. You do you. Live your best life. Proverbs tells us a different story. Proverbs says that true wisdom is found in being true to God. And only then do we find out what it means to be true to ourselves. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Seeking wisdom is like daily bread. We turn to him as the source every day. We can't store it up, we can't master it, we can't control it. We have to rely on our relationship with God every day as we turn to him and ask for wisdom, and he promises to give it. In our last couple of minutes, I just want to give us a little insight in one passage in Proverbs, now that we've had a look at the whole thing, which says a little bit more about this quest for wisdom and how we might begin our little journey and our big journey in the way of wisdom. And it's from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 to 8, some of the most popular verses in the whole book. First, we have a positive command and then a negative one that goes after it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Sometimes this verse gets misused to defend an anti-intellectual version of being a Christian, as if trusting God is the opposite of thinking things through. But that's a misunderstanding. Remember what we saw earlier on, that's what fools do. True wisdom doesn't ignore instruction, but it seeks after it, while not being overconfident in our own knowledge. The next one, in verse 6, is I'm going to pick up each pebble and look at it. We could spend forever on each one. Now we have a command with a promise in verse 6. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. What does it mean for us to fear God? It means to acknowledge God in all of our ways. And if we start there, we're on the road to wisdom. Trusting God with our jobs, our families, our money, and our relationships, and all that we are. Trusting the God who made us, who knows the way of wisdom. And then we have two commands. This time the negative one comes first. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This is a radically countercultural message in a world that says be true to yourself. It's easy for us to conform to that and build a version that seeks our own wisdom, our own authentic life, instead of turning to him. And instead we end up with a Christianity that's some kind of self-fulfillment program. Just another way of being true to myself. And Proverbs says avoid that kind of thinking. And then the sequence in verse 8 finishes with this little promise. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. What a wonderful promise at the end. It might sound like all this talk of fear of the Lord and seeking wisdom for him is actually just a way for God to keep us pinned down and take away our freedoms and make us slaves. But God isn't like that. Wisdom isn't like that. It's about true human flourishing, which God wants for us all. True freedom isn't my personal individual release from constraints. It's a life lived the way I was meant to be, acknowledging God in all my ways as the one who made me and knows what's good. And just remembering that God is God and we are not. And that's what living a wise life is all about. To acknowledge that he is God and we are not, and to try and live the ways that he would have us be. And that, it turns out, is where true freedom lies. Time and again, God dares his people to test him on this, to try and live as a community that lives that way. And he promises them that a life lived in that kind of wisdom, turning to him every day, is a life of real human flourishing.